we really enjoyed the screening. We thought that the use of images really brought the story to life, and we loved the musical accompaniment. We thought that brought a real sense of emotion. And Sally was such a great storyteller, and she really gave such an important story. It's real character, and Emmeline really shone through as a person.
It was wonderful to see the history of Manchester so intertwined with the story of how she became a suffragette, and also to learn more about her family background and her commitment and devotion to her family, and how she was really fighting for our rights for future generations of women to come as well. It was wonderful.
There was a lot of pride in the room, a lot of Manchester pride in the room, which was great to see. But I also think people were quite angry that all the things that Emmeline was fighting for, we feel
remain unresolved.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think we're all ready for a protest right now.
Wow, we're sort of ready to go on the campaign trail at this point, definitely. It was very inspiring, and it really gave a lot of courage to women to say, okay, this woman, she was brought up in these really difficult circumstances, but she's actually made a difference to the world for women, and we can do it too by doing some very small things in our lives to help make a difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of the story that people don't know, as we've discussed before. Emmeline is overlooked as a public figure, as a political figure. So I think that's a really important part of the story that we don't tell very often.
I think as university lecturers, when we talk to our students about these topics and about women's suffrage, we almost start midway through that campaign when it's assumed that women would always have wanted to fight for the right to vote. And this actually gives a great deal of background about how a woman's experience in her day-to-day life, all those little niggles, all those gradual sort of encroaches on her rights on a day-to-day basis would have eventually marked that tipping point where she thought, right, I'm going to form a movement, I'm going to do something about that. And actually for us as teachers, and I think for the wider public as well, it shows you how a movement can develop and how we can fight for women's rights collectively and inequalities in general as well.
So Manchester is a real hotbed of radicalism in the 19th century, and so as Emmeline's growing up, there's a lot of political discussion, agitation, debates that would have really kind of roused her as a person who was really interested in campaigning for equality and all sorts of different forms of equality. But it was also a city of great divisions, social inequalities in particular. So as well as it having a really important history as a place where campaigning and protest takes place, it's also a place where Emmeline would have experienced so much inequality in all of its forms. So those two things really contribute to its very unique history when we're looking at women's rights.
I agree. Manchester, we're so proud to work in Manchester and to be part of this, and I think that Manchester's radical spirit is still with us today, and the way that it pushes back against injustice and continues to have these conversations, even hosting wonderful events like this, and also having the architecture and the history of radical protest to support movements like this is actually crucial to showing people that we have a longer history of overcoming these kinds of things, and we can continue to push for change.
Really enjoyed it. It was really good. I think
really moving.
Really worth coming. It was very moving to watch.
I think it made you think about kind of how it relates to you kind of modern day, and think about your own issues, sort of like work or in personal life, and how even certain things that it can affect you today. I think it's just really got me. I think
it's something that's always important, like the story of the suffragettes is really important, but I think at this point now, I think it's never been more important in a way, like we were saying in the Q&A, so I think it's really important at times like this to watch programmes like this, because I think they're really helpful in terms of teaching us and inspiring us to do more and do as much as we can, really.
I think everyone will really enjoy it, and I think it's very interesting to watch as well, kind of getting more of an insight into Emmeline Pankhurst and the movement.
Now, why is Emmeline Pankhurst's story such an important one to tell?
She changed history, I think that's it really. She had such an impact, a pivotal impact on something that I think we take for granted. I'm quite passionate, like Steve made a big point about people voting, and I really think you should. People died for the vote, I think really. you know, it's imperative. And I think when you watch like the suffragette film that came out a few years ago and they show the years in which women got the vote, I mean, it's still such a relevant issue into other countries in the world, you know, places, you know, that I think it was like even Italy or France got it in the 70s, and there's, you know, there's a lot that don't have it.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty amazing. Just really impressed at seeing a different side of the story and just kind of hearing what actually made her become the character that she is, rather than focusing on just purely the things that she did. Felt like a much more personal story. I think it's all the things that she's fought for and thought were problems in the time are still in some ways still issues now. So it's so important to remember the things that she's done, because it's work that we still have to continue and carry on her legacy. I think it's the culture. Everyone's just a bit feisty. Everyone has something to say, and everyone's just happy to cheer on other people and push the cause forward.
I really enjoyed the screen, and I've got a real keen history interest in the history of Emmeline Pankhurst. I've been brought up in Manchester, born and bred, so it's very important that everybody gets to know this story, very much so. The women. The hand that rocks the cradle rules the world, and the women are particularly key. So a woman like me, heading towards her 5th decade, has been brought up with Coronation Street characters, strong northern grit, and then brought up by grandparents from the cotton mills who fought for the rights, who husbands went off to wars and who were left to look after the children. It's that very, very independent mentality of getting things done and looking after, keeping a roof over your head in that industrial environment. That's where it's come out of. For me, the legacy is different for different people. For me, I've got 2 children now who are about to get that freedom to vote, but ever since they've been in the pram, they've been taken to the polling station, they know how important that vote is and what we did to get that vote. And even though it's 100 years on, we've still got a long way to go before we get any further.
I thought it was excellent. It was a really important film, and it's beautifully told. It humanised the woman. It humanised the icon. It placed her in a family. It placed her in a time. It placed her in a city, and it was all the more powerful for that. Well, the story is hugely important. As we said today, the circumstances that women found themselves in back in those times, and she as a figurehead for challenging that was tremendously important. It's important to remember that there were a great many other women involved as well. I'm sure she'd be the first to say that herself. But as the fearless leader, then it's only right that we give her this respect that's long overdue. I don't know what it is. There's a certain humour here, a certain spirit here, a certain bloody mindedness here. You know, the ship canal, we're one of the biggest ports in the world despite being 35 miles inland. You know, that's bloody mindedness if ever there was. But I thought it was great actually they called it Birth of a Militant. You know, sometimes we airbrush these people, we airbrush the strength of their resolve out. We airbrush, you know, Martin Luther King springs to mind in the way his story has been reframed by the mainstream. Well, you know, these were radical people really going against the status quo, and I think it was important that was said. Here in Manchester and more widely, as was said on the platform today, there's a mood change with the Me Too thing and with women's rights stepping up a gear around the world. Hopefully this will be part of a wider conversation that, as was said again, we need to press on with continued reform on these issues.
I think it's brilliant. It's wonderful to finally see a film about Emmeline Pankhurst. There's precious few films about women in history, so it's really great to see her celebrated. Well, her name has a lot of recognition. Of course, she's just one of thousands of suffragettes, but her name is synonymous with militancy, with taking a stand, and with determination, I think. I think there's something about industrial cities where the rate of change 100, 200 years ago was so rapid, and the rate of progress and the growth was so huge that there was a lot of social change that produced all kinds of disquiet and all kinds of realization about inequality, and that kind of friction just propels a city as wonderful and as vibrant as Manchester to ask for more and to fight for more. There's something really special about having a hero, someone who you can identify with. She's a working mother of 5, and she wasn't the poorest, but she worked with the poorest women. And I think there's something that's really important about having a a hero that you can look up to and identify with to try and propel what is needed now for change. I think it's really interesting to see the woman behind the politics and the name that is commonly understood. And I think because it humanises her, it makes it so much more accessible and identifiable that any woman today could just say no, enough, and get up and fight and encourage and demand change.
I thought, first of all, very moving, very Manchester, very radical, and very just in the end. So, the whole story needs to be told. It's long in the coming, and I think it's a really good story to illustrate the radicalness of Manchester and the women's part to be played in that. Yeah. What it's about. So people, second city, never been told what to do. Being in the north, there's always that north-south divide. Even although we're 2 hours away, we're always quite willful. We'll find a way, and the impossible is achieved. Emmeline showed through that film she never gave up. So time and time again, our scientists never gave up. Split the atom, the first passenger railway. Things happen here. First computer. The first of everything, vegetarianism, first cooperative movement. We've done it all up in Manchester, so it's amazing. So for that to be part of a women's movement and then to take that fight to London and the politicians, I think it's just a testament to Mancunians. Well, first of all, she had 5 kids. She still managed to go out and do all of her work. So that tells us, we were talking about what that means for modern women. So modern women have that life already, so it's never give up. I think the point about the city being built by perhaps men, we need to look at that and never give up. So that equal gender in whatever we do in terms of Manchester and Greater Manchester going forward, that's the lesson I think I'd like to take to people of Manchester and the children and my daughter, who doesn't know this story as well as that. So I hope that people watch this film, and I hope all schools show this film around Greater Manchester and the country. There's a lot to be learned.
Very emotional, absolutely fantastic. You think you know about this woman, and then you found out so much more. It was really, really interesting, and how relatable it is to today, and quite shocking as well that it still relates to today. Absolutely wonderful. Really, it was educational, but you didn't realise it. It was really warm and a really human side to somebody who is so political. And the reasons how she became like this, I didn't realise. You think you know the background to something, and then we actually find out about it. It's so much more fantastic. I don't think it's so much a legacy as we need a reawakening. It's always there. It's always there in society, but it's up to us how much we allow it to surface and be there. I think it's always going to be around, this kind of inequality, and it's up to us to keep a check on it. And I think she would be shocked at how much we've let slide and how much we have thought, well, this has got better, so I'll put up with that because at least that's not happening. That was happening 20 years ago or 100 years ago. No, keep it moving, keep it going, don't accept things. You can make a change, and something that I took away from it is it can be small gestures that you can do that make a difference, and the fact that you just need one strong person to guide you, but you can do things yourself as well. You don't have to put up with things. You can say no. All you have to do is say, I'm not accepting it, say no, and see where that takes you.
It was fantastic, really good, really insightful, and great that it was so Manchester-centric.
I'm not originally from here, and I think having moved here, there's a real heart in the city, and people are just so proud to be from Manchester, so I think that's just really evident all the time.
I don't actually think it's massively recognised that it was Manchester that it was all founded from. I've lived in the northwest all my life, and I had sort of vague understanding that that's where it originated from, but I hadn't understood just how much the city was behind the movement, and then it moved on nationwide. So that's for someone who lives in the northwest, it was really insightful.
Yeah. I also just think there's a lot of information there that probably people don't know. There's a lot, as I said in the questions afterwards, everyone knows of her and what she stood for, but past that we probably don't know a lot of the details, so the film was really interesting for that. I thought it was actually quite straightforward, so I think it's simple for people to understand. I actually think it's for the family. I think children will be able to listen to that and resonate with today, so I think the way it came across was great.
Feeling that I should definitely be doing more as a woman in the modern day society. I think we both work with young children, and there's an awful lot more that we can certainly do. It's 100 years on, and we've got a long road to travel, so yeah, definitely. We're on it.
Yeah, we need to get out there.
Brainstorming.
Brilliant.
It was so refreshing.
Yeah.
I mean, we're plasterers, we own our own plastering company, and we've been...
Yeah, it's been
a
rocky road. It was really inspirational for us because we've had obstacles and ridicule and still do to a certain degree. So it's just nice to think like, you can keep pushing forward. Yeah. I think we're up with...
It's words, not deeds, isn't it?
Yeah, we're still in baby steps in a lot of ways. I think what I take away from her is just motivation and just not caring what other people think and pushing forward with what you want to do and what you want to change as well as, because we want to change things. We have ideas to do so.
And we want to build things and get more women on board, because that's a problem we're facing, is bringing women into the construction industry. So it's really trying to inspire other women that it is a possibility.
It was funny in the question and answers, and Sally was saying, women need to build cities because to make it flow more for women. And we sat there, we're like, we're trying. It's so difficult to get a trade. It's a really hard road. So it's just, I think Emmeline Pankhurst is just very inspirational, and it just gives you that little bit of a push, a little bit of motivation. So it was really, really good for us. Definitely, definitely. It's inspiring, and there's so much still to go through. Until I started working in my industry, I didn't realise the certain obstacles that you would face. I've never experienced prejudice before. There's a lot of lovely people out there, and very supportive people, but there is still like quite a large section of society that don't really like you. And I think we're still making moves towards getting over that and changing attitudes more than anything, really, from small children and education to in your own home and the way your roles work at home, to what careers you take and what opportunities are out there for you at the end of it. So
I think you bring up a good point with education. I mean, I never learnt about Emmeline Pankhurst in school, and that's a big issue actually. I think it really needs to be education where it starts from, doesn't it?
Yeah, it would have been nice to have that inspirational figure as a young child, had more different roles spoken about and.
Oh, it was so amazing. It was so emotional. I just felt like it really captured the story of Manchester and Emmeline Pankhurst and just the whole thing, really. It was fantastic. Well, it's a radical city, isn't it? If you look back on the history, I mean, Emmeline was just one of many other things that are going on. And even today, if you look back to last year with the bombings in Manchester and the amazing community and the support that we have for each other, I think that says a big thing about Manchester. It's just such an inspirational story, and it's a story that needs to be told, I work at the Pankhurst Centre, so we welcome visitors from all over the world to hear the story, and everyone's interested, and we have school groups that come to learn about the suffragettes, and it's just, I think it inspires young people today to be able to make a change and make a difference, because that's what Emmeline did and that's what we can do today. I think it's really important that we highlight the past. I think, there are so many things going on today where we could lose hope. There's so much negativity in the news, there's all this stuff going on, but if we look back and we focus on those amazing figureheads, then that's something to, you know, the conditions that she was working in at that time and the conditions that she put her story forward into was like much even more difficult than we're dealing with today. So I think it's just really inspirational. I think it's about Manchester being the home of that, the birthplace of that story. I think it's about you can do anything, you can make a change if you want to make a change. If we all work together, we can really make a difference.
Well, I said it was bloody brilliant. I don't know if you can use that on television, but I thought it was really informative and interesting and great. And I felt a bit cheated because it was only half an hour. I was like, oh, what about the rest? So I really enjoyed it and thought it was really good. I am a practicing barrister, and as we know, next year will be 100 years since we were allowed to practice law. And so for me, the legacy, and of course Christabel, Emily's daughter, wasn't allowed to practice law because she was a woman, but that's another story. So the legacy for me with Emmeline is her sheer determination and tenacity to do something about the right to vote. The legacy actually is that she's installed in the city, and which I think she got from her parents, because I was particularly moved by her mother's campaign against slavery, and Manchester of course is ripe in that campaign. We know from the Rothschild women and the Manchester campaign against the slavery in America especially. For me means that she's not just part of that, but actually as a woman first and as a mother first than anything else. I really connect with that desire to say this is wrong, and she had to go out to work, and I got it where she said my children love me more because they see less of me. And you know, my sons really appreciate me, and when they're having their Pokemon gifts and whatever else, then you know, they know that's because mummy's at work. They do not even question it. I think there are many factors. You know, we know from Engels, Marx. I think it's a city where people, and you know, the arena attack, if one can say that, showed us actually. All my southern friends were just saying, look how Manchester came together. You know, in unity. And I think it's a city that just has that sort of grit to it. If something isn't right, then it takes a cause and it takes that radicalism. And you know, so from the law to other aspects, when there are cuts in the criminal justice system and funding cuts, Manchester is the one saying, okay, we're going to have to protest against this and go on strike, dare I say it, or do something about it. So as a city, I think it's just got a feel of being inclusive and all-encompassing, no matter what your gender, what your race, and indeed what your social background is. And I think it's all those things in one. From then, from Emmeline to now, it's the same. To me, it hasn't particularly changed. And I'm pleased to see there are more female toilets in the city. So I think the message really is be yourself and do something about it. Call it out. There's no need for negativity. It's a great time to be a woman or a man. And I think the message should be, as Emmeline showed us, that actually when sadness comes and the circumstances change, get the grip and go with what is required. You know, she had to downsize, get a job, you know, and raise all those children on her own. I dare say that she was still missing her husband, but she got on with it. So I think for young women today and the future, is not to be complacent, to sit back and say it's all being done. You know, for my daughter, who is 4, she's got 2 brothers, not to be stiped in, you know, oh, there was all this baggage. Actually, Emmeline got on with it, and she made such an impact, you know, for me as a woman, and as I said, as a mother and as a wife. And I'd like to pass that on to the generation behind me, whether they're practicing in law or medicine or engineering or tech, or even before that, that actually this was a woman who was saying, we've got a right to something, and believed in a cause. And actually my main message is, young people should be voting. Vote.
I absolutely loved it because I work at the People's History Museum, and so it was amazing to see the banner that was in the background, because the kind of story behind that banner was that we acquired it this year, but there's a amazing backstory that I was actually sat in an auction house on my own, alone, having missed out on it. A dealer outbid us, and so it's just been amazing that from that, the kind of spirit of the people of Manchester, we raised £5,000 in a crowdfund in a week, and then applied for extra grants, and then we're able to bring it to Manchester. So kind of having been on that journey of the banner, missing out on it, and then from that the public, seeing how strongly people felt about this banner having to come back to Manchester, and then we took it to the One Show. It met Hillary Clinton, and then it's going to finally go on display on the 2nd of June at the People's History Museum as part of our exhibition, which is called Represent Voices 100 Years On. So it's looking at historic artefacts like that, but reflecting how far we've come in the last 100 years and what we still need to do, and bringing contemporary voices in there. So it's going to be amazing. Oh, I don't know. I mean, my colleague summed it up really well in the video of like what Manchester does, 2 weeks late, the rest of the country does 2 weeks later. And I think through what I suppose I'm talking from a professional perspective, but everything all the stories that are in the People's History Museum, back to the Peterloo Massacre in 1819, which happened right here on this site, that kind of shows, even though that was a national event, but it happened here in Manchester, and it happened for a reason here because of the spirit of the people. They saw something that wasn't right at the time. There wasn't an MP for Manchester, and people came together to demonstrate and say that's not right, and then later Manchester did get its MP. But I think it's those stories, if you can see, throughout history, it's just, I don't know, there's just an urgency, and people just want to see something that's wrong and want to change it. Well, I think one aspect was the thing that was discussed about the programme being commissioned, in the sense of I want people to take women's history seriously, and not just see it as, oh, it's women's history and maybe we'll tell you the story, maybe we won't, and it be embedded in kind of history curriculums, and everybody to know about Emmeline Pankhurst. I've got a 2.5-year-old, and she now knows everything about Emmeline Pankhurst because of the children's bedtime stories that she reads, and she was actually the other day dressed as Elsa and Emmeline Pankhurst combined, and was walking around the lounge chanting votes for fairies, and that's absolutely amazing that she knows about it. But I want every 2.5-year-old not just to read stories about boys, but to read stories about women as well. But I think also one of the things that we've encountered at People's History Museum, because our exhibition is crowdsourced, chatting to people say, well, what have women still got to fight for? Quite successful women might say, oh, well, things are okay. But I think it's remembering that there's women that aren't as empowered. There's still lots to do even for empowered women to, with equal pay and sort of shared parental leave to even things out. But I think thinking about the women that aren't empowered, that their voices aren't heard, and not forgetting, like was mentioned, the women that are in Yarlswood, and what we supporting people that don't have their voices heard, to make their voices heard, and that's what we're trying to do through the exhibition as well.
It was absolutely fantastic. It was really emotional, and I got a real sense of her as a woman, and the kind of, she's not just campaigning, but it's that whole personal sense of her as a wife and a mother. And I absolutely loved a quote about not seeing her children, which makes them even fonder of her in her absence. I think that's, this idea of feminism and what we view it as now. We have to view them as feminists in their own time and in their own right, even if it's different values sometimes to what we see. I think it's this idea that young women today, might not realise that women never had the vote. It's an assumed thing. There is almost, you do grow up, I grew up not really knowing that women were different to men in that way, and then you kind of learn about it in history, and then you kind of get involved in kind of, social history and politics and things, and you're like, hang on, there's like a real inequity here, and the inequity is, around fighting for things that are really important, and the fact that it's only 100 years, that's not that long really, is it, when you think about it? It's within people's living memories. There's people still alive that were born before women had the vote, and that is like astounding really, and it is just, so important. I think people who know about it have a massive sense of pride, and it's lots of people know about it, which is good, but there's also lots of people that don't know about it, and I think that's why things like the film, things like the programmes at the People's History Museum, they really contribute and kind of bring to life this kind of continued fight for democracy, and it's in many areas. It's not just politics, it's not just voting, it just kind of represents across. But in terms of Manchester's role, Manchester draws people. I'm not from Manchester, but I was drawn to Manchester to live here because of its radical history, and I think that's an important thing to remember, that people want to live here because of that reason.